but the truth is that we don't actually execute it most of the time, in the sense of when we practice we just kind of breeze through it a lot of times and not spending that extra. Yo, what's up guys? I wanted to talk a little bit today about zooming in into things. So for example, if you want to study music or guitar, I feel like a lot of times it could be very overwhelming. There's a lot of information and there's a lot of things we want to do, a lot of styles, a lot of music, but I think in reality, if we zoom in into one element super deeply, we can get much more information from that. So in that sense, if we know C major scale really freaking well, we basically know almost everything, because we understand the relationship between the notes, we understand the relationship between the chords, right, the harmonic progressions, maybe even more, could be also more complex progressions, right? So by learning and studying C major scale, we can basically unlock a whole universe of musicality. And I think a lot of times when we practice, we don't focus enough, we don't spend enough energy to study and understand the relationship between the notes, understand where our fingers go, because every one of these actions, just playing this triad, right, I'm jumping between strings, I need to sync my right hand and my left hand. There's a lot of information that is involved in every one of those little actions, and I think a lot of times when we can't do an exercise or we can't fully execute something, we tend to kind of like be frustrated instead of trying to understand what are the building blocks of that phrase, right? So for example, if I want to play this triad, well, there are a few elements, right? So first I would need to understand what the notes, what's the repetition, maybe I should figure out a certain fingering, but also I should try and listen very carefully and understand how this note sounds against the root. In this case, C major, so that would be the root, but I want to hear the tension and release within that simple progression, right? Which is, not even a progression, it's just a triad, but within this line. So what I'm suggesting is that when we practice, we want to slow down everything as much as possible, basically to allow ourselves the time to learn, because it's just, if we do everything fast, we can't really absorb the information when we practice as much. So we need to let our brain study and internalize the kinesthetic memory, the muscle memory, the sounds, everything that is connected to these actions. So I think a lot of times people just kind of play the exercise and they can do it, but they don't necessarily internalize all the information that is possible to obtain from that time of practice. So what I'm suggesting is basically, when we're practicing, slow down the action and try to break it down and understand how many variables exist within that action that we're doing, whether it's could be a more chromatic line, or just like a pentatonic thing, or a harmonic progression, right? But just understanding what are the building blocks of that phrase and what are the actions that I need to do in order to execute it well, right? So in that sense, seeing the position, understanding where my fingers go, how many times am I playing, how many, what's the picking pattern that I'm using, is it up and down, is it hammer on? There are a lot of variables, and I think understanding that is super crucial in order to do it well. This sounds so basic and we all know it, but the truth is that we don't actually execute it most of the time, in the sense of when we practice, we just kind of breeze through it a lot of times and not spending that extra, brain power to really study and understand what we're doing to the best use of our time, because we're already in the practice room, or somewhere practicing. So let's just do it right. That's what I'm suggesting.